Girls can play this. Why can't it be called Game Boy Girl?
Before smartphones and mobile apps, the only way to mobile game was on a portable game console. But just like today, even though there is an array of selections, you would probably only want to make 2 for the most part. Of course, the 2 most popular first-gen portable consoles is the Game Boy and the Game Gear. Sorry Atari, that wasn't really good. And yeah, it may have been the first colored portable console, but it didn't really sell well and it was overpriced and the battery life was really bad. But if you guys would still like for me to make a video on it against another shitty portable console like the Gamecom, I would love to do that. But anyways, here's the short introduction before the video starts like always. The Game Boy only costed $89, which was very cheap compared to other handhelds on the market. While on the other hand, Sega had a very pricey $149. It really shows how much the color technology was back then. This explains why the system did not sell as well as the Game Boy did. The Game Gear only sold 10.6 million units compared to the Game Boy's 50 million. And I know that some people are going to say that the Game Boy sold 118 million or 200 million, but I'm talking about the first Game Boy. Wikipedia and all other websites will always say the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Light, and the Game Boy Color all combined. There is no website that actually says the true sales of the first Game Boy, so this is just an estimation. But anyways, without further ado, let's go fast! The Game Boy was created by Gunpei Yokoi. The story goes that one day on a train ride home, Gunpei Yokoi saw someone else playing with a calculator like you would do at school after a test. And I guess he had one of those light bulb moments. Because he already worked at Nintendo before making toys, before coming up with the Game Boy, they would first start off with the Game & Watch series. As you can see, the animations would actually work just like a calculator. Some parts of the screen would light up and some would go dim. It was very simple and still very fun. And after the success of the Game & Watch, Nintendo would go on to make the Game Boy, which had better animations and the ability to change cartridges instead of having to buy a new system every time. Just like the situation we are now with the Nintendo Switch being sold out for pre-orders, the Game Boy had a similar situation. So many people were buying it that they would sell out really quickly. And then Sega put their 25 cents in with the Game Gear. Sega really wanted the Game Gear to be everything that Nintendo wasn't. And the ads totally roasted Nintendo.
Thousands of helpless teenagers trapped in a dull, drab world of colorless video games. But there is hope. Color? Introducing Game Gear from Sega.
The equivalent marketing strategy that we would see today is most popular with Samsung mocking Apple, showing how Samsung is good for all of the reasons that Apple isn't.
Oh, wow. Here, I want to share. Can I share too? No, yours doesn't do that.
So some smartphones are smarter than other smartphones.
Exactly.
What are we doing with these phones?
What am I doing with my life? One of the oddest things to me, though, is that even though the Game Gear was discontinued in 1997, Majesco picked up on it and resold it in 2000 for a little while. And you can actually tell which Game Gear you have. If you have the rainbows, then you have the Sega Game Gear. But if you have 3 white ovals, that is the Majesco version. Now, I'm not really sure which one you would consider rare. I'm just going to say the Majesco one is rare because it probably didn't sell as much as the original Game Gear. So yeah, if you have 3 white ovals, then you're a lucky charm. The Game Boy displays games in green and black, or if you'd like to say black and white, or gray and whatever you want to say. It had no backlight, which was an issue, because that meant that you couldn't play it at night unless you had a flashlight. But it didn't have a problem with there being too much light because it had a saturation bar, which is actually pretty helpful. And for those that are curious, or the super geeks that never knew this, the display is a reflective STN LCD. And yes, those LCDs are still being used till this day. When you pump your gas, or you change the temperature in your room, or you do math. I'm just kidding. We all know that we just play 1 and 0 on it after the test, right?
My favorite game.
Of course, the Game Gear being famous for having a color display, it could display up to 32 colors at once. It in total had 4,096 colors, and it used an LCD screen. Clearly, the resolution, it was 146p. And in all honesty, even with someone who's looking at like 2K portable screens in this present day, it still looks pretty good for the time. It doesn't bother me at all. It's very clear, especially for being one of the first color portable consoles. It looks really good. The Game Boy had a battery life of 15 hours. Of course, just like everything was in the past, just like how it sort of is now, it used AA batteries. Yeah, those things that leak and destroy your stuff, and they're really just all over the place after they die. And after they die, they become pretty useless, because even if you get one of those chargers, they sometimes don't work, because guess what? They leak! Clearly not all of the time, but these things are such a burden. Can't believe that bunny still lives on. Fuck you. Okay. With the Game Gear, just like everything in life that seems so perfect, there's always a catch. And this was the catch for the Game Gear. It needed 6 batteries. And you want to know the worst part? It consumes them so quickly. Some have reported that the battery life has been as low as 4 hours. The longest that you can get out of it is 6. But your average kid or adult is not going to be playing a game for 6 hours straight. I would imagine maybe like on the school bus they could get some game time, or before work, but clearly this battery life may not be as bad as people say it is. And hey, you could plug it into a wall and play at home. So then all you have to do is just use up the batteries on the car ride or the lunch room, whatever. Why did I say lunchroom? Cafeteria, Jesus. Even though the Game Gear and Game Boy are almost 30 years old, they're always something that you can come back to. Nostalgia on the go. And it's crazy to think how far we've come with portable technology. This is a modern day phone compared to the Game Gear and Game Boy's size. And it's strange because like 12 or 13 years ago, for like a 5-year-old like me, seeing a Game Gear or Game Boy would have been totally normal, like the modern day thing, because I had a Game Boy SP. Of course I would have been used to a better battery and a better screen, you know, with the backlit and stuff, and of course better looking games and just better games in general. And it would have felt totally normal to hold a Game Gear. I'm not sure about a Game Boy. I think that would feel a little bit outdated just for me, just because it has no color, but it would still be like normal to see, because those types of LCDs for like cheap games like the Tiger games, even though those were dead by the time I was alive. And also, here are the cartridges. And clearly I don't have a Switch game to compare it to, but this is around the size that it should be, which is shocking that a game that is much more advanced is much smaller. And eventually, it'll become even smaller. And in fact, it could, but that wouldn't really make any sense, because you would like lose a $60 game so quickly, and it would be so hard to grip it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Sorry for manspreading.